Hello, Zinger Nation. This is Justin Roberti. How are you today? Good to see you on this Monday. Things have been pretty mediocre in the crypto world overall over the past little while. I'm sure you've all been following the Celsius story. It looks like they have a hole of about 1.2 billion in their finances as they go through the very traditional finance process of going into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But in the meantime, we're going to talk today about NFTs, get into NFTs and artists a little bit, because we have Mieke Marple with us, who is an artist and writer who's been operating in the Web3 space for, I think, since 2019, and of course had a traditional art career before that as well. I'm going to bring her on and we're going to talk about that as well. Please remember to like and subscribe if you get the chance, because why not? It costs you nothing really. Just take a moment to go ahead and hit like and subscribe and you'll make me happy. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and bring Mieke out. Hi, Mieke, how are you?
I'm good. I do have to say that I've actually only been in this space since February 21. But
right, I think 19. Yeah, okay. Well, so how has it been since February? I mean, that is a condensed ride, isn't it? You've launched the Medusa Collection in that time. I've seen you've worked with a couple of nonprofits and spoken at a couple of other places as well. You've been publishing about NFTs. You've been pretty heavily involved in the space. Well, first of all, with your original Medusa Collection, are you still working with that group and hyping that project, or how is that going?
Am I working with which group? With the nonprofit?
Or are you on Discord hyping the Medusa Collection, which I believe was originally for the Steve Van Zandt charity, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah. There was a portion of proceeds that went to the education nonprofit Teach Rock. And I'm happy to sort of talk about that partnership. But I launched the Medusa Collection in December of last year. So yeah, that was, I guess, like 7 months ago. And it was a generative art collection. My first generative piece. I have a traditional art background, mostly painting, and before that I was an art dealer. So it was really, really different than anything I'd done before. I'd made a couple NFTs before, just one-of-ones that were literally just photographs of my paintings, so not very technical. So that was a real, I mean, making that collection changed my life, and was one of the most meaningful experiences I've had. But yeah, I'm currently actually sort of switching gears, focusing on what I'm working on next, which is going to be a Pegasus collection, which will also be generative, but a very different kind of generative. And maybe we can get into that more later.
Well, that's really interesting. I saw an article as I was looking at your stuff before we came on air today that you had an article out there, something to the effect of, here, I'll show a couple of pictures of the Medusa Collection and various other things. Where is this set up, by the way? Where are you doing this display, Mieke?
That display is at Vellum LA. So Vellum LA is probably one of the best NFT galleries that I've ever encountered. It's on a standard vision screen. I don't know, that's about like 30 feet wide by, this is actually a painting that I made inspired by the collection. But yeah, there's like actually a lot of digital techniques that I did for the first time that I actually am now trying to bring into the physical world, into the analog. And that's also been a really interesting dialogue between my practices.
So let's start with the generative thing, having changed your perspective on art. How is that? Or I believe you said change your viewpoint on life overall. How did that hit you philosophically? What part of that I believe you, that sounds amazing. How did it have that impact on you?
Yeah, there's a number of ways. First, I would say the biggest part for me was in making generative art, so in handing over some of the creative decision making to an algorithm, essentially, that was a big act of letting go of control, and sort of a leap of faith, that I'd never had to do before in my creative practice, but also maybe ever. And I think what was interesting is that the Medusa Collection, like the result of that, so I would set up the parameters, right? I would kind of come up with the guidelines, but ultimately the algorithm made the sort of final compositions. What stared back at me when I looked at the Medusa Collection was something that I felt was more me than anything I had made before. That had how I tapped into a deeper layer of my subconscious, that the work was more wild, it was more free, it was more colorful, it was more full of expression, than anything I'd made before. And I was like, oh, I have that in me. And it took sort of letting go and having faith, or just kind of letting go and giving some control up to an algorithm to see that.
That's really interesting. Is that because of kind of like the Heisenberg effect of like, once you make one decision, other decisions are kind of shut off, whereas in this case, where you're working with a generative, project, you've got AI that's kind of doing all sort of color combinations within a scale. For example, I mean, is that what you mean by letting go of control, or sort of allowing it to manifest itself in various ways?
Yeah, I think something happens. There was a good quote that I can't really recall it right now, but somehow, like, when you introduce chance, you can get sort of deeper in touch with your intuition. That's where things like the I Ching and all these kind of different methods and modalities, like, they really are about sort of accessing your subconscious using using randomness or chance. And so I feel like that is what I experienced with the Medusa Collection.
It's kind of remarkable to take something from the Web3 world back to traditional, like, art that's designed to be, presented in a gallery, for example. It's kind of interesting to have that thinking go two ways. How do you think how is the traditional world viewing NFTs at this point? Are they trying to write it off as a blip now that the prices have gone down? I bet a lot of them are trying to write it off as a blip. If they haven't done it themselves.
I would say, I think there's for a lot of the art world, there's like a big sigh of relief. They're like, oh God, we don't have to learn this. Oh God, this isn't going to topple us. That they're sort of, I think many of them suspected it was a trend, and now they feel like it's confirmation of those, that original sort of suspicion.
Right.
I think that overall that's it. But I mean, there are some, I don't know, LACMA is doing, the LA County Museum of Art is going to be doing a show of women digital artists, and sort of making this connection between sort of women working with digital art or video art or these kind of technologies in the past, and women working with NFTs now. So there are, certain, it still has made an impact, and some people are still very interested.
And do you think, as a medium, digital and Web3 has kind of opened up new funding and new recognition for a wider variety of artists? Who has it benefited the most?
Well,
probably the super rich, actually. Never mind.
I think we all know the answer to that.
It's always Elon Musk and the rest of the super wealthy. But no, beyond them, among artists, like I've seen you've worked with inclusion a lot, and in terms of, I saw that you were, also spokesperson for, I guess that was the Girls Who Code thing, where I saw the press release come out, which I thought was really cool. Who have we been able to help elevate, maybe give more of a voice to through this?
Yeah, well, I mean, hands down, who has gotten a voice through this are digital artists or artists that
Mhm.
work primarily with digital medium. You know, in my whole time as in the traditional art world, digital artists were always relegated to the outskirts. They were never taken as seriously as painters or sculptors
Mhm.
or anybody like. And it's so ironic because we're surrounded by digital media. Like
Right.
digital media is the language of our time. So how could we not take digital artists seriously?
Mhm.
It's baffling to me. And yeah, I mean, I think the art world, the traditional art world, still not picking up on that is a real. They will. I think it's an eventuality that we will come to realize that this is the art of our time. That this
Mhm.
is they are using the sort of visual language and tools that define our age. So I would say first and foremost, who it's helped are digital artists. It's made their work commodifiable in a way that it never was before, and that
Right.
is really important. Yeah. And then, I mean, I could, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was looking for, I know that you've been involved in a number of communities, and our original theme was, developing NFT communities for good, or communities that are out there doing good for people, doing good for artists or underrepresented groups. What kind of projects have really kind of inspired you since you began on this crazy adventure a staggering 16 months ago or something like
Yeah.
that, right? If it was February last year, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the projects that I was a part of that really, um, yeah, was an incredibly positive experience for me was this Artists Who Code exhibition of generative art by women and non-binary artists that I co-curated with Cinziana Velicescu, the owner of Vellum LA. Um, and that was for the Artsy platform. And in that show, there were 31 women and non-binary artists making generative art, some of whom had been making generative art for 20 years. And they always they with never any expectation of making money. That they really were so much on the fringe of what anyone in the art world was paying attention to. And that was incredibly inspiring to not only see them being paid for their work, um, but yeah, just I don't know, to be working with these women and non-binary artists that just love this medium so much.
Is generative was generative art the term before NFTs? I don't mean to parade my ignorance here. Maybe I don't know, but I mean it's like I can think of Andy Warhol, and I'm not going to think of him now. Anytime I'm on pressure, I can't think of the name. But artists that work with lithographs and so forth, and are maybe creating different colors. Obviously, Andy Warhol did different prints and different colors of Maryland soup cans and so forth. So like those are like the earliest I can think of to like an analog form of generative art. But when you talk about somebody being into generative art for 20 years, like what is that impulse? I thought that was something that NFTs pulled out of art as a way to justify having a run of 5,000 instead of five original pieces.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting to think of Andy Warhol as a generative artist, because he certainly was in some ways, and it's sort of like letting go of control and just sort of having your assistants make it, and they're sort of just being so the definition of generative art is basically when you hand over decision making to a system outside yourself.
Hmm.
And that system doesn't even necessarily have to be a computer. It can just be a
Hmm.
set of rules. And so artists traditional artists like Solo Witt, working in the 60s and 70s, well known for doing this. Basically, when you bought his work, you just bought a set of rules, and then
Right.
the work kind of manifested itself.
Mhm.
Vera Molnar is one of the first. She's a woman, as woman from Hungary, one of the first artists to work with computers ever, working in this also in the 60s and 70s, in pretty much obscurity.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many actually. Like Annie Albers made sort of. You can make generative art with a sort of loom. So she
Hmm.
made generative art with a loom, like programmable loom. So there's
Mhm.
a really like. I don't think the term generative art is relatively new, but the idea of generative art or practices are actually they go way back. And yeah, I don't know. It's actually a pretty rich and interesting history that includes a lot of women.
Mhm. So you already started into the traditional art world. You were doing kind of larger pieces. You were already working with digital art to some degree. So it's a pretty natural segue into NFTs. But you still have one foot in the traditional art world. What have you been able to carry over between the two? Are there any lessons to be learned that are crossing those two spheres? Because right now, I think there are a lot of people who are into NFT art that were not collecting art prior to this, for example.
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of people. So what lessons can we carry between the two, or are there lessons to be learned that kind of are universal to both?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I heard this interesting statistic that Gen Z, so people ages 18 to 24, are spending more money on NFTs than stocks, and certainly more than
Right.
traditional art, I'm sure.
Well, they're more fun. Stocks are pretty boring. If you looked at it, it's pretty boring. There's
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, and I think that speaks volumes. And I don't know if the art world has the traditional art world is like realize the significance of speaking to this younger generations. But I think that's something that I really would that would behoove the traditional art world to do, because I
Mhm.
think, to be straight up honest, like I think you get a 20-year-old going into a gallery just full of paintings and white walls, it's like they
Mhm.
cannot hold their attention.
Right.
And so I think thinking of ways to just, break from traditional ways of doing things to be more exciting, to speak to sort of like younger generations is something that needs to happen. Um,
Mhm.
on the flip side, like for NFT communities, I think what could benefit the NFT space is just a little more rigor, I think, in terms of the exhibition of NFTs. Um,
Right.
Not just in terms of like nice screens and thoughtful curation, but just all of it, like catalogs and sort of critical writing pieces, just like a real sort of maturity of context and presentation. I
Mhm.
think is what the NFT space needs.
Really, and maybe to get away from this hideous cartoon style that dominated last year. I can't. I'm not talking about
Yeah,
Medusa.
I think
I
there's
like
a
this
nice,
stuff.
you
But
know,
Bored Ape, oh my God, like honestly, the art style could miss me completely. It reminds me of Art Crumb a little bit, or Mad
yeah,
Magazine.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have Art Crumb hanging on my wall, so or I guess in my wallet. So I don't know. You think that the style and presentation has matured a little bit?
In a weird way, I'm gonna even though it's not my aesthetic personally, I'm gonna defend the sort of more cartoon style, because I also think that this was a whole type of art with its own rich history that was basically completely ignored, like by the traditional
Mm-hmm.
art world, just completely not taken seriously as art. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if these collectibles are art necessarily, but I do think that they are like high art in the same kind of way. But I do think that they are their own sort of, that they're worth taking seriously, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
that they're as valid as anything else being made.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, of course, like, do I think that a Bored Ape with its insensitive imagery has the depths of like a piece by, I don't know, Rafik Anadol? No, I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
don't. But I guess it's just like there's a place for that, and it's there. They can exist. It's fine. There's enough room for everyone to exist.
Mm-hmm. So other lessons between crossing the world. You said that you said that you think that NFTs can learn something about the presentation style coming from the traditional art world. What are you hoping is going to happen coming out of this shakeout? I know. What have you seen from it? I've seen a lot of really depressed people personally all over social media. I mean, it certainly has had an impact. Although I was always fond of saying the least interesting part of NFTs were the price. I'd rather talk about the notion behind them. So, well, what do you hope that we'll draw from this downturn?
Yeah, I mean, I think people that are sort of fair weather friends will leave.
Mm-hmm.
um, Fair weather artists, fair weather platforms, fair weather collectors, all of that, will not be there. And then at its best, there will be a real camaraderie between who is still here, and who stays with it because they believe in the long-term vision. They just believe this is the future. They feel pretty certain about that. I mean, I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think they aren't here for the money, but they're here for the ride, and because this is their community, and I don't know, because they just care and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. So your next drop, you said it was going to be a little bit of a sequel to Medusa's. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah. So I feel like for a little bit of context, I should
Mm-hmm.
tell the Medusa story, or what was sort
Yeah,
of
let's go ahead. Let's do it.
motivation behind the Medusa collection. So the Medusa collection actually I made some Medusa paintings in 2019 when I found out that Medusa was actually a rape victim that had been raped by Poseidon, the god of the sea, and
Mm-hmm.
turned into a monster by Athena, his wife, and also a god, and banished to a cave. And I think most of us know the rest of the story, but the fact that this part of the story was, I didn't know it. Most people I talked to didn't know about it. The fact that it was not the part of her story that anyone sort of cared about or paid
Right.
attention to, just I felt spoke volumes. So kind of making this part of the story sort of Medusa's humanity and this kind of turning her into sort of a survivor of abuse was like
Right.
a big agenda behind the Medusa collection. So my follow-up collection that I want to do is the Pegasus collection, and Pegasus comes out of Medusa's decapitated head. And Pegasus is actually, so when she's beheaded by Perseus in the cave, as most
Right.
of us know. So Pegasus, and actually this other, I'm actually forgetting this character's name, but it's a big, it's like a giant. So Pegasus and this giant these twins are born from Medusa's decapitated head.
Okay.
And they're the children of Medusa and Poseidon.
All right.
So I thought this was extremely interesting, that basically Pegasus, I think, is like one of the most beautiful mythological creatures there is, right? It just, to me,
Right.
like symbolizes like hope and freedom and flight and beauty and purity and all of these things, and that Pegasus could actually be like conceived from this moment of violence. It's just so interesting. It's like literal alchemy, like turning something so
Mm-hmm.
ugly into something so incredibly beautiful.
Right.
So that's really like, I want to kind of lean into that part of the story with the Pegasus Collection. And my
Mhm.
idea, instead of doing like a big drop, with as I did with the Medusa Collection, that it would actually be a really small collection um, of Pegasus NFTs that were contained within them a whole generative collection that maybe would change every time you looked at it or something like that.
Mhm.
Because there really are many ways to make generative art. You know, I think we're used to generative art as being a big drop, but you can also have it all of that generation within a single NFT.
Mhm. What's important to you about generative art? Is it because it's something that people can, choose something that's customized or unique? Well, customized is kind of the wrong word, but like a combination that's unique to them, for example? Is it because you're able to express different possibilities all kind of in the same frame over and over again? What does it say to you?
I think what's so fascinating about generative art to me is that it really feels like it's tapping into something deeply contemporary. You know, I think this ability to make, yes, a huge proliferation of images that are each unique um, is something that kind of could only happen using an algorithm and is only possible at this very moment. And so
Mhm.
to me, it just like it really speaks to the moment we're in. And because we are surrounded by an endless stream of digital content.
Right.
And and it's all kind of basically permutations of the same thing. And it's all fed to us from an algorithm, you know. And so it's like we're living in a generative world every second of our day, but we don't often get a say in it. We don't often get to make the outcome ourselves. We just consume it. We just receive, what big companies want us to receive. So being able to make my own generative art, it feels like a way of asserting agency within that world. And that's very empowering for me.
Mhm. Okay. And so that's great. You've got another drop coming up. Well, no, when is what is the actual release date on that drop on the Peg? Are you calling it the Pegasus drop?
Yeah,
And
we have Pegasus Collection. I don't have a
mhm.
specific date, but I'm actually going to be working with a new platform on it called evo.art. So I will be sure to share that information when I have it more confirmed.
When it becomes available, is there anything else you're looking at in the space, or anything else that's particularly of interest to you? What developments of 2022 have really kind of caught your fancy in terms of a creative direction?
Well, I mean, I think these like dynamic NFTs, which I'm seeing more and more of, are pretty interesting. Again, I feel like as with generative art, I feel like NFTs are starting to explore the properties that are inherent to them and nothing else. You know, like making a dynamic artwork or a generative artwork is really
Mhm.
something that kind of only an NFT can do or is best suited for an NFT. So I feel like
Mhm.
NFTs are really just starting to come into their own, and instead of trying to be like something else, they're really learning what makes them them, you know? And I think the more they kind of play with their own smart contracts or co-create with computers, it gets really interesting.
So, for any artist that's thinking of getting into the space now and probably wishing that they had tried this, I suppose, probably a year ago, like, frankly, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, aside from try a year earlier, that would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
good.
yeah. I would say like it's actually like maybe it's not a great time to get involved financially, but I think it's a really great time. It's still really a good time to get involved. Like there's less noise. People have more time. I think to, you know, I don't know, give to other people, especially if they see that they're serious.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a lot of like cool stuff you can do. Like if you do stuff on Tezos with FX hash, that doesn't cost that much necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So you might not make as much as you would have a year ago, but I mean, people are still making money. And,
Mm-hmm.
So many of the artists who in 2021 really were making a killing were artists that had been around, they were there
Mm-hmm.
through 2017, 18, 19.
Right.
They formed these relationships with collectors and other artists. And so in some ways, that their success was because of all the time they had invested into the space already.
Right. And because they already had the built-up audience to be able to bring into the NFT space.
Yeah, and that audience was familiar with their work and sort of familiar with them as a person. They weren't just showing up out of nowhere. So yeah, I mean, success often looks like it happens overnight, but it doesn't actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tezos is a great platform, by the way. I agree with you, Lord Byron. Low cost around doing it. I actually had them on the show before. I think they're a really great project. Do you think that there's going to be, obviously there's been a lot of this emphasis on, these clubs, these that form around the top tier projects and the exclusivity of owning them. Obviously, like I don't know that that $150,000 PFP is going to be in everyone's future in this year, or was necessarily ever for everyone. With lower floor prices, do you think that more people are going to get involved in a wider range of communities, or how are you seeing that break out in real term as you go about and do your work?
Yeah, I think it's still being sort of to be decided, like are more people going to get into, I mean, Bored Apes maybe isn't the best example because there's so much stuff happening around them right now.
Right.
But
Well, sure. Okay, well, let's pick on V Friends then. I couldn't believe it when I first saw it. I was like, really, Gary, you're gonna doodle on a cocktail napkin, call it hardworking hippo, and then sell it to me. I cannot believe this. This is the timeline I live in.
It sounds like
Probably
the
on the show Wednesday, not Gary himself, but somebody from Banner NFT. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I think a lot of these projects will be sort of like the ICOs from 2017, like that they.
Really?
I do. I mean, I hate to say it, but, and I'll come back to that, but I actually don't think it's a wholly bad thing. But yeah, like there was a moment, and some of it fueled by massive greed, and it kind of led to this, like we'll always remember ICOs from 2017, and we'll always remember these sort of PFP collections from 2021.
Right.
But I don't necessarily think it's all garbage or waste. Like I feel like so much was learned in that process, and I'm sure so many of the ICO people have like gone on and gone into DAOs, like that knowledge that's gained doesn't go away. It kind of just gets turned into the next thing, and the next thing is hopefully a better evolution of what they were doing.
I've spoken to so many artists I've spoken to artists who I respect very much, who are clearly making a quick stop in blockchain or a quick stop in Web3 and are moving on. And to them, this is just another channel, and they're pretty frank about that. But you don't strike me that way. You are still operating both in and out of the Web3 world. First of all, which one do you like better? Which one do you think is more rewarding for you? You have to choose between your children all of a sudden. Which one has been more rewarding over the year and a half that you've been doing this?
Well, that's such a hard question. I mean, I This is what I think. If I'm going to be 100% honest,
Mm-hmm.
it is at sort of NFTs, because I think it has the most potential, and I do just hands down believe it's the future, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be a utopian future, but I do think it's the future. I
Right.
do think it reflects the world in a way that the traditional art just doesn't.
Do you hear that, big galleries? Mieke thinks that it's passe what you're doing. She has
But
no further interest in participating with you.
but I want to add the caveat that all that I've gained and all that I've learned and all that I continue to learn by being in the traditional art world, I think I can bring to the NFT world and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And we still have bodies. We're never gonna not have bodies until we're in the matrix fully.
Unless we are.
Yeah, totally. We are. I mean, I guess anyway. So I'm still this huge believer in the analog. And this is why I really think we need to figure out better ways to bring NFTs into the real world and create these kind of like sacred spaces for them. And I think Vellum LA is doing an amazing job doing that, but they're literally just one gallery. And I'll be totally honest, like so many of the NFT galleries I've been to, I just am not impressed with. Like they don't do much for me. I don't think they treat the art as sacred objects. And I think the traditional art world is really good at doing that. They bring almost like a cathedral, like a religiosity to the work.
Well, sure. There's always been a crossover of art and, well, certainly theater and religion, which is what my background was in originally. So religious. Yeah, I have an MFA in playwriting. That's how I came at. That's how I got into fintech, making me. Which is going to be one of the most accidental trajectories ever. Yeah. So, certainly
podcast probably.
Well, this is that podcast, basically. And I love talking to artists because it gives me an excuse to talk a little bit about art. And I think you've always been fascinating. I mean, honestly, I have. I'm not saying that I've been like. I don't want to make myself appear to be cynical. I don't blame really prominent people, some of whom I've interviewed, who've come into the space, done a drop or two, and gotten out and gotten back to doing what they're doing. That's fine. I mean, that's the way it is sometimes. But I think it is cool. Cronenberg was a great example. When I interviewed him, he was like, I like, he said, I love typewriters. He went on a little bit about how he loves typewriters in terms of form factors. But he's like, if you've ever tried to write a script on a typewriter, it's a terrible experience. Word processing works much more like the human mind. So to him, since his work already for decades has been about transformation, right? It's very natural for him, even though I think he's in his 80s now, to make this transition over to this new format. I think that's really cool when it can happen, when it opens up something new for people and for a wider variety of people. So that's what I hope that's doing out there, and that we haven't lost all of that drive because there's not the same, easier payout. I mean, there was an idea of there being an easier payout in at the beginning of last year. I don't know. I mean, I think there were a limited number of times it was true. But what is your advice for artists who are looking to get into NFTs now? I mean, we already kind of touched upon that. You said that there's in some ways more time and a more open space now. Do you believe that that's true?
Yeah. I think there's a lot less noise, and I feel like in 2021 that people were just going at this inhumane pace almost. And I think it was because they kind of knew that this wasn't going to last forever. And I mean, just so many people I knew just straight up weren't sleeping. And you can only do that for so long, And so I think that people now have not only more time, but they just have more sort of bandwidth. Like they're just a little more spaciousness in general. And I think that's really healthy. And, I mean, I think I feel like it's all going how it's supposed to. And maybe that sounds strange, but like, anyone can just like look at sort of the trajectory of the internet and just see a really parallel course, like there's a new technology. It's kind of baffling to people for a long time. All of a sudden, it kind of clicks how money can be made. And there's just a huge speculative bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, for better or worse, that just seems to be human nature. And then it pops and, and then the growth keeps happening, like just slow and steady. And then there's more sort of bubbles, but they aren't as sort of memorable or drastic as that first big one.
Right. So if people want to keep up with what you're up to next, where should they come look for you? You want them to go to your Twitter? What do you want to drop your
Twitter or Instagram? I'm pretty active on both. And it's just my name at Mieke Marple. And my DMs are open on both, so I'm pretty friendly. But yeah, I mean, I have some like pretty interesting articles coming out. A couple that are about NFTs specifically, and then others that are about more like art in the art world. But yeah, I mean, these are really my two big passions, and like, if I can act as a liaison between those two worlds, I will feel really happy. I feel like that is sort of my purpose in life, actually, strangely.
You feel like you're doing a lot of interpreting of the NFT world? I'd imagine a lot of your peers in traditional art probably want to corner you and demand to know how this is supposed to work.
Well, not so much anymore. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think if I can be the person that they feel comfortable going to with their questions, like that will be a major sign of success. And I will say, Artsy they've been really wonderful to work with. I curate the show with them, and I keep sort of writing NFT articles for them. And they've really helped me become this kind of liaison and given me a real opportunity that I think speaks to both worlds.
Mm-hmm. I think it's awesome. I look forward to seeing what you come out with this year. I'd love to see the Pegasus drop or anything else that's coming up. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to speak with us today. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah, this is my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mieke. Take care.
You too.
All right, everyone. Well, that was fun. Honestly, I've had Mieke in mind to have on the show since I started the shows several months ago. So I'm glad that she was able to make it today. As always, whether you're stressing yourself out about NFTs or stressing yourself out about crypto and this whole Celsius thing, for example, I hope not. First of all, I hope that you didn't get mixed up in that, given that how it's going right now. But one way or the other, take a little bit of time to get away from your computer, at least at some point today. Try to talk to another person about something that's not related to crypto, for example. I know my wife appreciates it when I talk occasionally about things that are not related to Web3. I try to make time for that at least a couple times a day, and try and be able to clear your head and relax a little in between all the market watching and so forth. Whatever course the market's going to take, it's going to take, but we have to take care of ourselves in the meantime. So come join me on Wednesday. I believe I'm going to have not necessarily Avery, but one of the people from Vayner NFT coming on to talk about the new branding and talk about VFriends a little bit. So it's very timely for me to make fun of VFriends a little right before then. But yes, I think that they'll be coming on the show on Wednesday at 5 p.m. ET, which is when it still is. Please do like and subscribe if you've stayed with us this long. We very much appreciate you, especially you, Allison, and Lord Byron, the two people who have been talking in my chat today, and of course Aaron Bryan as well. Thank you all. Thank you to the three of you. You get a personal shout out just for just for being there. All right, man. We will talk to you soon, and peace. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Take care. Bye. There I go again without, I had it queued. There we go.